Good timing.
Sorry. Okay, we'll get started. Welcome everybody, and the public is also invited to join this meeting in person or remotely. So if it's no use me reading off the numbers, because if you're not dialed in remotely, you're probably not gonna hear me. Anyway, we'll call the meeting to order and we'll rise for the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Public forum. Does anybody wish to speak at public forum? Don't see anybody, so we'll move on to the agenda. We do have some corrections. David, you want to go over those?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So if we could add to regular agenda item number 8, application for community projects, to add Senator Smith's office along with Senator Klobuchar's office. And then on number 10, if we could do 10A, consider a resolution supporting Senate File 2793 and House File 3073, encouraging equitable funding for payment in lieu of taxes. And if we could add 10B, which is a presentation of the Hometown Fiber Pine County report, and Economic Development Coordinator Leslie Sauter will do an online interactive review of the information that's available.
Thank you. Any other additions, corrections?
I'll move.
A second.
Motion by Ludwig, second by Lovgren. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Looking for approval of the minutes of the March 15th, 2022 regular county board meeting and summary for publication.
Second.
Motion by Lovgren, seconded by Moore. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And then the minutes and reports and correspondence of the Pine County Chemical Health Coalition of March 14th, 22, and the Pine County Zoning Board minutes of February 24th, 22, and the Pine County Surveyor's monthly report for March of 2022.
I'll move that.
A second.
Motion by Moore, second by Lovgren. Any discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Consent agenda, we've had that in front of us for several days, so
Motion for the consent agenda.
I'll second. Ludwig.
motion by Lovgren, second by Ludwig. Any discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's to the regular agenda, and we will have a public hearing, tax abatement. So we're going to have a presentation on the project. Leslie, you're going to do that?
Is this on? Yes. Okay. Hi, I'm Leslie Sauter, your Economic Development Coordinator, and I just want to give you guys a little overview of what this project request entails. So the Village Apartments, there's a tax abatement request. It's in the amount of about $200,000 for a 25-unit multifamily apartment building in Pine City. Why this request is being made? There's a very colorful history on this site. It used to be the Pine City feed mill. It closed in 2009. The buildings, because they weren't being used and maintained, started to deteriorate, and it was court condemned in 2014. Over the course of the years, city put a fence around it, was just trying to keep it from hurting anybody. And it eventually became tax forfeited in 17. And then we worked to demolish them in 18. And I say we, because that's about the time that I was working for the city. An RFP, a request for proposals, was put out to find a housing developer for the site because in between getting it condemned, demolished, we had done a housing study in the downtown area in Pine City and noted that there's a pent up demand for additional rentals just in the core area of the city. Right about that time is when COVID hit and things kind of got slow and not a lot of developers wanted to move forward. However, in late 2020, early 2021, a local developer did come to the table and the city sold the land to him this last summer, 2021. We applied for a grant through deed to help with the remediation costs because we, like I'm still at the city paid for the demolition costs and there still remains some contamination in the soils. So if something is to be constructed there, the soils need to be removed and a vapor mitigation system has to be put into the building in order to make it safe for inhabitants. So we did apply for a grant from deed and got it. It's a $55,000 award to help with those costs. And over the last 12 months, the developer's been working with the city and even myself to get zoning approval for their development. Some variances were approved and overall it's almost ready, but it's also very hard to make cash flow. So we applied for a workforce housing grant to help with the construction costs. And that's a unique funding source for housing. And it's pretty much for greater Minnesota in order to make some of these smaller multifamily properties more easily constructed. In addition to that, that we have not heard from, there is this tax abatement request. So where is the property? It's located just outside of downtown Pine City, across the railroad tracks from the library, kitty corner from Robinson Park. It's on the backside of a place for you where the shelter is, and there are about 3-4 unit apartment complexes being constructed on that same block. The current value of the property is just under $50,000. The estimated value will be about $1.5 million approximately after it is developed. I'm noting that it's a former site of blight. Contamination still exists, and we have identified a housing need in that area, in that community, and pretty much across the county. So those are important when you start considering a tax abatement request or even a tax increment financing request. Here is a photo of the proposed development and their site plan. It's a very small site when you think about how many units are being constructed there. And that is where some of the variances had to come in for total lot coverage and density, I believe, and parking stalls. So it's been a very fun little project to work through to get through the zoning and all that. Total development cost is a little over $4 million. And the tax abatement request in front of you today is $200,000 over 15 years. Those are based on projections of the 1.5 million value and increasing over time. In the first year, the county's taxes are estimated around $11,000. With the increase of 3% each year, the overall taxes for the county base would be $211,000. And this request would be 95% of the total property tax, and it would start 2024 and go through 38. And Kelly created this lovely graphic that kind of shows what that means. So at the bottom in that dull orange is the amount of taxes the county would continue to receive if it wasn't developed. That green area is the new taxes created from the construction of the site, and those would be sent back to the developer. And then that top blue is what the county would retain. And it's, still a little bit fatter than the orange one. So we, can see that we are getting still more than we would if it wasn't developed. But in my experience working in housing development, there's kind of like a break even point where it's about 45 to 50 units that you have to construct in order to not necessarily need all these sorts of business subsidies for housing, whether it's low-income housing tax credits, tax abatement, or tax increment financing. These are the tools that Greater Minnesota and small communities use to help build this type of housing. So that is the end of my presentation of what the request is, and turn it over. If you guys have questions for me, I can answer them now. Or...
Leslie, yes, go ahead, Matt.
So I understand the abatement, but you said there's some other things they can apply for. So if we grant the abatement, are they still eligible to apply for the other ones?
Yes, the abatement actually helps their grant request. When we submitted the workforce housing grant application, the city had to provide a match, and the city agreed to provide the match of the deed grant, their existing demolition costs, and as well as, a tax abatement request should it come in.
Can you go back to that nice graphic? Sorry about that. Because it appears to, I think you said it, we get a little slice of tax now,
Yes,
but even with tax abatement, we're gonna keep some of the taxes that are paid that are almost equal to what we get now.
yes.
So we're not going backwards.
No.
But potentially, future boards will see that jump up in 2039, is that correct?
Yes.
Correct. And you also get 5% of the new tax. So you get what you currently would be getting plus 5% of the new tax. And that's the blue area on the graph.
Okay, okay.
It's a combined on those two then.
Correct.
So, Mr. Chair, why a tax abatement and not TIF?
Great question. It has a lot to do with what was done before the mill was tore down. It would have had to have been established as a redevelopment district. We didn't do that at the city, and I feel bad about that. Learning. But yeah, we had conversations with Ellers about this project and what it would be eligible for, and tax abatement was pretty much the only one left on the table still.
Okay.
Yeah, question.
Yeah.
So with this, does like the city and the school district, do they take part in this as well? Or is this just a county
The request has only been made to the county and the
Okay.
city, not the district.
and the city?
Yeah.
Okay. So there's more than just us
Yes.
as stakeholders. in
An
this.
equal request has been made to the city.
Okay. And we haven't done a whole lot of abatements, have we, as far as this? This is it?
One.
Well, we've
Or-
done one other.
One other one?
Yeah, the
And-
hospital.
And I've had a few other people kind of inquire about it because it really does help develop and get stuff like this going. So is this something that that you have kind of taken on in your new position, or
Yes.
do you think this would have come about if you see where I'm going with this?
Yeah, I think it's a good question, Josh, because when we got into economic development, it costs money to make money. And this is one of those business decisions that we have an opportunity to make to help somebody do something better for the county. Initial, it's not costing us cash. We're not writing out a check. It's deferring a payment that we would have got if they built this, but if they don't get it, they won't build it possibly, so we won't get it anyway. So I don't know, people can throw stones at anything, but I think it's a something that we thought of when we hired an economic development coordinator, that these are tools that other communities have used. And when you look around other communities and wonder, why do they have these apartments? Why do they have this? Why do they have that? Well, it's because they had somebody digging in the weeds. And that's what we got going on now to get these things figured out.
Well, I had another local business owner talk to me about, he wants to build a new facility and he's kind of looking at similar things, and he maybe has already contacted you because I told him to call you, but that's the kind of stuff that I want to kind of, if this is something that we can do going forward for people to make that decision, because like you said, cash flow is a huge issue. And little do people know that, a multi-million-dollar facility like this, a couple $100,000 doesn't sound like much over 15 years, which what is it? 12, 13, 14, 15,000 bucks a year. But that makes the difference, whether or not you're gonna do it or go somewhere else. So, or not do it. So I appreciate all the work.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
Just one comment and then one question, if I may. I just want to be sure folks know that Mike Gaynor is here. He's the City of Pine City Community Development Director. And so I think it speaks to the partnership that Leslie has with the cities, that she, as the county community, or as the county economic development coordinator, cannot do all the work alone in the cities, that those cities have staff dedicated and work in partnership. And so I want to be sure that we encourage that continue. And then a question, Leslie, is there a target market for who would live in this housing, what the rents might be, or how it will be filled?
Is market rate housing. I know what I've heard is that it would be targeted at possibly Pine Tech students to provide, because there is some efficiency apartments, 1-bedroom apartments. But the rents are pretty affordable, and Cole is here. I don't know if you know the rents off the top of your head, but they're very affordable, $700 to $1,200, depending on how many bedrooms you have. There's also the garage option. So market rate, but affordable. And I think that is the premise behind the workforce housing grant application, as well as these tax abatement requests, is that it is workforce housing, but it's not out of the realm of affordability on the average wages we have here.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the board? We'll open it up to the public because we're full of public, but this is a public hearing, so anybody that's here can ask a question or give a comment, which I don't hear any. Here, no public comments, so we will close the public part of the public hearing and go back to any additional questions and discussion from the board. I don't hear a lot of questions. I would ask if we consider the adoption of the resolution 2022-17 approving the property tax abatement for the village apartments.
I will make that motion.
I'll second.
Motion by Lovegren, seconded by Moore. One last chance for discussion. Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Good job, you guys.
Start digging a hole. Thanks, everybody that was involved. And thank you, Cole, for
Thank you very much.
Thank you for
sticking your
doing
neck out
this.
and making things happen.
We'll do it. Thank you.
Yep.
Have a good day.
Now we'll have a public hearing on redistricting plan.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. I'm Kelly Schroeder, County Auditor Treasurer. And if you remember back in November, we had a discussion on a preliminary discussion on redistricting. So it is your responsibility following the census to consider redistricting the county commissioner districts. There is reasons in statute that you must redistrict, and we walked through those back in November. And the only reason that it came down to is if you guys needed to redistrict would be if you determined that the districts were not equal in population as possible. And we dug into that quite a bit. When you're making districts as equal as possible, you always have to remember that when you're drawing the lines on the map, which do you want to switch to the map, Ryan? When you're drawing the lines on the map, it must be regular, so you can't be drawing crazy shapes around. It must be compact, so it's not that I can make this big long line all along like the western boundary or something. And it also needs to be contiguous. So for example, the city of Henriette, it's within Pekegama Township. So I can't just take the city of Henriette and say, well, I'm going to make that part of District 3 now, because it has to stay with Pekegama Township. And so if you could do some of those things, yeah, you could definitely make them more equal as possible. But when you have to take both Pekegama Township and the city of Henriette, well, then it gets very difficult to make any changes. And as you saw last fall, I ran through all sorts of crazy options that I could think of to make things more equal as possible and really don't ever end up with anything that's as regular, compact, and contiguous as what we currently have. So we've got the map up there showing the current commissioner districts, and my suggestion is to continue with the current district boundaries. There was a table in the packet that showed where, how the populations are spread out between each of the districts. And each of them have approximately 20%, which, I mean, that's as equal as possible. We've got District 1 at 21.45%, and then District 4 at 18.73%. And so, you have variation, but all of them are as close to that 20% as any version we could find, was my thought. We had put it out for public hearing 3 weeks ago for today, and I had put, the proposals out there. I received no comments up to this point, but if you have questions or if we can move to public hearing otherwise.
My only thought, and there's nothing we can do about it, but because however many people are housed at the federal prison in Sandstone count in this population, but they can't vote.
Right, but that is the only place in the whole country that they're counted in the census. And so if you didn't include them there, then you just have citizens who aren't
Right.
being counted.
Right.
That's the only place that those individuals are counted.
Correct,
Across the country,
Every
prison
every
populations are
prison-
counted the same.
right,
Chisago County has the very same issue.
Correct.
The prison in Rush City skews their out for northern.
yes. And so that lands in District 5, Matt's district, but again, because there is a lot of discussion on that across the board of maybe you should subtract them out, but I have a really hard time with that because they're not being counted where, that prisoner is not being counted where they live. And so, they need to be where they are.
But it is a significant number.
Correct.
When you have a small, when you only have 5,000 some people in it per district, and you take out I don't know how many are there right now. More
The
than 1,000.
1,200? Yeah, I think it's 1,200-ish.
That's what-
Yeah, do you have that number, Matt? I don't have that number
Well,
handy.
it could be, but their housing is full too with staff now and
Correct.
they get to vote.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah,
Mr. Chair,
yes.
what jurisdiction does that show up in?
It shows up in the city of Sandstone.
I'm fine with it.
Yeah, I don't know. I've looked at it 10 years ago and I looked at it now. There's not, I just think it's good to have that discussion. But I don't know what we can do about it. It actually, I think, got closer in numbers this year than it was 10 years ago. So we will open it up to the public again, because it is a public hearing, if anybody in the public wishes to speak on this subject. Which I don't hear anybody, so we will close the public hearing and go back to the board. Does anybody have anything on the board that they'd like to discuss? If not, we'll look for a motion to approve resolution 2022-20, adopting the county commissioner districts and
What we gonna move?
Oh, second.
Motion by Ludwig, seconded by Moore. One last chance for discussion.
I think we're very fortunate because talking to other
Yes.
counties, they had to mix all their districts and they have commissioners running against commissioners in almost all of the districts that they have. So I don't know.
Thank you. Yes, it is. It is.
Yeah.
Some of them surround us that are going through some very much consternations. Hearing no discussion, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And now comes the fun part. We get Kathy Reiser, come on up.
I want you to know that Tom's watching you.
I see that.
Other Tom. Hi, Tom.
Okay. Well, I think we're gonna go over there first.
Microphone. Thank you very much. 40 years is commendable. You got 40 more? At least 11. Janet Schumacher was here for 50 years. We gave her the 50-year deal about a year ago, so.
I don't think it's gonna be 50.
You don't think you can beat her?
No.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
40 years to do anything is amazing. So
Thanks.
40 years working for Pine County is awesome.
Thank you.
And Kelly's got some nice words she probably wants to say, but
Oh,
we appreciate what you do, Kathy.
Thank you.
That smile you just smiled,
Yeah.
that's what I always see when I come here. So we appreciate that. I sometimes we forget these people that sit in those offices, they take a lot of crap. They do. We get phone calls and these people get people walking off the street that aren't very happy about something that they got in the mail some days. And you guys, you always have a smile when I see you. So thank you.
You come at the right time. Did I get it, Ryan? No?
It's okay.
Okay, I started to write something short and then ended up long, so I'm really sorry. So Kathy has worked for Pine County since April 19th of 1982, 40 years from 2 weeks from now. It's a little interesting because her actual 40-year anniversary is on the next board meeting date. However, that is in Sandstone. No, that's not it. She's here a little bit reluctantly. And so I was a little bit concerned about putting her in the car on the freeway if she was going to jump or not.
She would jump. Yeah.
She may. So we're here. So Kathy began her career for Pine County in court administration and worked her way up to court administrator. In September of 2002, she came down to the treasurer's office and has been here since. Seeing many transitions, including the separate auditor and separate treasurer positions to an elected combined position, and now the appointed combined position. As I was thinking about what a 40-year work anniversary means, I thought of 40-year wedding anniversaries. They're considered the ruby anniversary. In that context, among a few other things, rubies symbolize devotion and passion, which seems very fitting for a work anniversary. One doesn't spend 40 years at a job without devotion and passion for what they do. And in Kathy's case, that is serving the public. I also thought of the opposite idea of celebrating one's 40th birthday. When celebrating one's 40th birthday, they are sometimes referred to as over the hill, which essentially means old and past one's prime. Someone's 40th work anniversary is the complete opposite of this. Someone with 40 years at the same job has a wealth of institutional knowledge that is irreplaceable. Kathy demonstrates the importance of this knowledge quite often, as she can always answer the why do we do this way without pause. And she has never given me the because that is the way we do it, Kelly answer. And for that, I really appreciate. I also wanted to share just a couple recent stories of Kathy's work ethic. And there are many, many more, but these were the two that popped into my mind. In Kathy's position, month end is a very busy time. And during the 2020 election cycle, we were a little bit busy, to say the least. During the election cycle, we have to be open the Saturday before the election. So in the 2020 election, that was October 31st, right at the month end. So while Kathy wasn't scheduled there to be there for assisting with voting, I offered to let her come in and try to get caught up a little bit, since at that point we had done none of our regular work, only absentee voting.
I never had anticipated that when we opened that day at 10 a.m., there would be a line literally from our counter out the door. So without pause, Kathy got nothing for month end done and helped us with absentee voting for the entire day and never complained once, just took it in stride. Another really recent story, which is kind of funny. I always pick up the mail from the post office on Mondays because it's a very heavy mail day. Recently, I was unable to pick up the mail on a Monday. And so Kathy happily went to the post office. But unfortunately, and not to my knowledge, I have to say, it was a law library book delivery day. But again, no complaints. She just got it done. So in closing, thank you, Kathy. I'm forever grateful for your willingness to share your knowledge and your willingness to get the job done, even when it wasn't what you quite bargained for. And then after the board meeting, there is cake right outside the door. So I'm hoping we can all partake in well, maybe not all of us, but partake in some cake in Kathy's honor. So thank you, Kathy.
Thanks, Kathy.
No, I mean, most of the time, it does not feel like 40 years. I mean, it feels like 10. But there are occasionally days when it feels like 100. But it's been a pleasure. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, we're gonna move on to number 4, which is reconsider action to offer for sale the county interest in Outlot A, Jackie's first edition. This is kind of
Yeah,
my
I
request.
will. I could tell that day you were in Florida with palm trees, and I don't know if you were hearing everything that was going on here, but I think you missed some of the conversation. But anyway, this is, I think it's important enough for us to bring it back if you want to bring it back for discussion, and we certainly will do that. I mean, I'm in favor of doing that, so I will move it to bring it back to our committee.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, and I think there's a lot at stake there. If people are, we didn't really have a in-depth discussion on the winter access part. So it isn't hurting anything to pull it into it. So.
Yeah, nothing, it's not, in my estimation, it won't change anything except that we're gonna take a better look at it.
That's fine.
And then
There's no harm
Yep.
in this at all. So I will move that.
do I hear a second?
So this is just to bring it back to the land and zoning
Right,
for further consideration, and then
Right.
it'll come back.
then it'll come back.
Okay, yeah, I'll second.
Any more discussion?
I have a question.
Yep.
So Kelly, what is the deadline to have this on for the sale this year?
So the first board meeting in April is when you approve the final land sale list. And so our next land and zoning meeting usually will be in July.
Wait till next year then.
It might end up, yes, being held over for one more year then before being potentially sold, if that's the decision.
Did you get any feedback from the others in the thing yet?
The other property owners?
Right.
No, the only one that we had received feedback was from the one.
And they all received some sort of communication. We know that.
Not direct communication, no.
Okay. That's the other thing I think it'd be important to bring that back for us.
And the other thing as we look for recreational opportunities for people, to basically cut off of an access to the lake for winter fishing, which has been the access of choice for 50 or 75 years. without offering an alternative to them is I think we can do better.
Mr. Chair.
Yep.
So is it, I don't know if I'm putting a work, is it something that we should do then as the county to make sure everybody there gets a communication on the sale of that? To make sure, how can we know everybody is aware of it? That's what I'm getting at.
So if we are going to move forward with selling it, then yes, every single owner in that development will be contacted.
Okay. So that's something we can work out. the details
Yeah.
on too, so,
Yep. So we're good.
I still have a hard time, because I believe that the people that purchased those lots believed that that was their access, because that was the intent. It
But
just got screwed up.
Yeah, but it's been
Screwed
It's
up for a long
been,
time.
it's been the way it's been for 50 years.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
so we're not taking away something from them. It's something that has kind of been granted unofficially.
Mhm.
And it's not necessarily, like Steve said, it's not changing anything that's going on now. The current landowners can still do what they do in the summertime. And then as far as the winter access goes, as far as I know, nobody's got an issue with it anyways. But like Steve said, I think before we do necessarily, potentially, the landowners would have to shut it down for
Right.
winter access. Before that potentially would happen, it would be nice to try to find an alternative, like,
Right.
so. And I think the land department has already been working on, or, you know,
Yeah, well, I felt like, I thought last time I was very close to saying, can't we just table this?
Yeah.
But, you know, because I don't know if I know everything myself, so.
Yeah. So this is just giving you guys on the land
Yes,
department a little
yeah.
more time to
Thank you.
research. Any more discussion? If not, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Okay, passes 4-1. Murphy acts. wait,
Mr. Chair, I'm
yes.
sorry, do you need clarification, Debbie?
Terry, I need clarification from you.
I voted no to reopen it. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Murphy access easement request. You're gonna
Yes.
take that one, Kelly?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. We have received a request from Mr. Murphy for an easement access to his property. And so on the screen, you can see the county actually owns the piece of property in blue there. And it's not tax forfeit property, it's actual county-owned property. We had obtained that some years back for potential gravel resources. And so Mr. Murphy owns the 40 acres to the north of that. And there are other properties up to the north of that that the people access. However, they have an easement on just to the west of the county land on that private ownership. So pretty much on the other side of the line where Mr. Murphy's asking for an easement from us.
We're gonna have two easements side by side.
Well, the road goes like this.
Okay.
So, and so Mr. Murphy has now come to realize that all the other property owners in that area have at least an easement along that eastern boundary of that neighboring property, but he has nothing. So he approached the land department, actually, it might have gone through Reese's office first, about obtaining an easement across the west 33 feet of that property, of that county property. After much research, it was determined that, I mean, it makes sense to grant him an easement. Reese looked at it and suggested that if we grant him an easement, we want to make sure that it's not an exclusive easement to him, because again, the road that runs there runs a little bit crooked. And so the other property owners up there also will really need to use it. And we also don't want to make sure that we lock ourselves or the township out. So Reese suggested that we grant it as a non-exclusive public use easement. And so we went back to Mr. Murphy and said, you know, our proposal would be a non-exclusive public use easement to be granted to you. He would need to purchase that. And so looking at how the assessor's office values things, it would end up to be about $3,500. And that was all proposed to Mr. Murphy and his attorney, and it came back as, they were willing to accept those terms. So it's before you today, to grant that easement over the west 33 feet of the county-owned property out in New Dozy Township. Questions, thoughts?
Anybody?
So this will not jeopardize anything that we would use that land for.
Correct.
Because I think, like, if he goes up the property on the west side of that, I don't think you can legally cross the corners. I think so. That's probably logically why he has to.
Right.
Because even though other people are going up there, he'd have to have permission by the 70001 property to,
Correct.
yeah, he'd have to get a piece there, but that looks good.
So in essence, then, does this become a forest road? Will it have a gate on it? Could you or I drive up there and drive in that because it's a?
Correct. That's,
Only the-
well, you could take it, Reese.
Oh, I mean, so it's not gonna be a forest road, but like I said, it's a non-exclusive, open easement, so to drive back up there.
So if I wanted to go bow hunting on the county land, I could drive in that road. And I don't even know how to get there. Yeah.
I think the issue is the road, when you get off of 32 is on private property. And so
Oh,
that's where the road is located. So technically you could walk up our property. But the issue is you get to the north end, it curves back onto our property. So it's kind of a mess. And so by making it public, that just opens it up to any of the landowners to the north. However, they're gonna have to go through Mr. Murphy's property. So I think it's just been used over the years. Now property is getting sold. And so that creates, some additional issues there,
but the fact will still remain that first little section of road is a private road.
Yeah.
Up
And
to
I
that.
don't know, I that's a
Up to
side
that
issue. I
gate.
don't think Murphy has part of that easement.
Correct. He
so
does
it's-
not, but
He'll
that's,
have to work on that
Right.
too. But it creates a whole corridor there. Maybe someday there's a road built on the section line, but at this point, it provides everybody to the north legal access through our property. So
I've been up there, one of the landowners was years ago trying to figure out something. I think it's. Any other questions?
I will make a motion to approve resolution 2022-18.
I can second.
Any more discussion? If not, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Help America Vote Act.
Getting a lot of.
We're doing a lot of business today.
That motion didn't include the authority to sign off on the deed.
Can I add that to the motion or should we just do another?
Do another one.
Okay, I'll make a motion for B.
You second?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll second.
Okay, any discussion? We're voting on B or no. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thanks, Debbie.
Good catch.
Good catch, yes. Now we'll go to the Help America Vote Act.
okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. We've talked about voting equipment a lot lately in the last 4 months or so. But this is just another piece of the puzzle. Back last early winter, late fall, I had applied for a Help America Vote grant, which was going to assist with paying for a portion of that election equipment. And we have been awarded an initial allotment of that grant of just over $26,000. And so I would ask that you authorize the county board chair and county administrator to sign that grant agreement to move forward to get those funds. There will be a second allotment coming under that grant. Not all counties applied for that funding. So that means that the remaining funding will be then allocated out to those who did apply. And so I am waiting to hear what that amount is, and there'll be a separate grant agreement for our second allotment.
I'll move that.
I'll second it.
Any question, any discussion? We got a motion by Ludwig, seconded by Lovegren. Any discussion? Not, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. You want to do the highway report too, Kelly?
I'll mark you that.
So every year we do have to submit this information to the state, and it has become useful information for the board on our finances. So and I just wanted to thank Sherry Anderson in our office for putting the information together. She does a great job. If she ever retires, you probably won't get a report, so. As we kind of page through this, the main summary of the report is found on pages 4 and 5. And that is the financial statement. So if you're an accountant, you probably know what that is. Page 4 has the asset side of the statement. We did end the end of the year with over $1 million in cash, so that was good. We have some accounts receivable. The state owed us $1.5 million, and then you get down to the bottom. We actually did have some allotment left in our construction. It's pretty rare. It's usually negative, so that does bump up our total assets a little bit more than normal for a total of $5.4 million. So that's pretty good. That does fluctuate significantly from year to year. So it's been 2.5, it's been 6.5. And it's really driven by the amount of construction and the cost of construction projects that we do from year to year, as well as our budget, obviously, that you'll see big swings in our budget, and that's really driven by the amount of construction we're doing that year. So page 5, if you flip that over, it has the liabilities and fund balance section of the statement. Our liabilities ended up just under 3 million, leaving a fund balance of about 2.5 million. That sounds pretty good, but that's broken out into 3 different areas. Our reserve for inventory was 555,000, and so we're required to set aside enough cash to replace our inventory that we have on hand. And then you can see a reserve for sales tax. That's really kind of carrying the day. Our collections have been real good. We will be spending that down significantly this year, though, with some big sales tax projects. So the final piece of the fund balance is the undesignated portion, and that's 370,000. Now this is down over $500,000, and so that's where we took the hit this last year. We lost 850,000 of state aid, and so we weren't able to make that up. And we're also we're fighting inflation on top of it. And so we did weather the storm. I think we came out in pretty good shape, all things considered. And the good news is this year our state aid is back up to where we would expect it to be. And so will it keep up with inflation? I don't know. That's just something we're just going to have to deal with. We probably purchased $2.5 million of supplies and equipment and parts and all those things that are going up. So if you put 5 or 10%, in some cases we're hearing 30%. Well, $2.5 million, that's a big number. And so I'm hopeful we'll get through this year in good shape and not drop the fund balance. But we'll see how that goes, and we'll have to analyze that come budget time. So as we go through the rest of the report here, there's page 6 as our accounts receivable. It's essentially other government entities is where we get our money. We do receive in money from the county departments is mostly for fuel. And so We purchased over 130,000 gallons last year, so how much is it up this year? You know, $1. That's gonna impact the sheriff's department, it's gonna impact the other departments as well, you know, so you'll have to watch for that. But we do have $2 million in receivables out there. Page 7 and 8 is accounts payable. That's the bad stuff. That's where we owe other people. And you can see some of the vendors that we work with. We do, several years ago, you might have heard about some counties weren't accounting for their benefits like long-term health insurance and those types of things. And so that was kind of a big deal, but we have $278,000 of benefits and salaries payable at the end of the year. And we account for that and set aside cash for that. And then our contracts payable on all our construction projects that maybe go back a couple of years even that just haven't been finalized out yet. So that kind of, this information is more of the detail that goes into that financial statement. So it's taken me 22 years to kind of get a handle on this, but I think I'm getting it. Page 9, for your interest, is our breakout of our inventory. It's kind of interesting, you know, we had almost $200,000 of parts on hand. Our fleet has really expanded in maintenance of the sheriff's department. They have a large fleet. We have more vehicles for the other departments. And so that, you know, it's kind of separate from our state aid. And so it's just kind of a growing part of our budget. It's just the way it is. And so those are areas that we're going to have to account for in the future. Typically, our inventory is about $500,000. So some of the difference could be increased prices, or we just might have had a few extra things on hand than we normally do, but it's pretty consistent in that $500,000 range. And then pages 10 and 11 is summary of our revenues and expenditures. And if you look at the far right hand column under total revenues, it's 11.2 million. And then if you flip it over to page 11, total expenditures are 11.6 million. And so that's not good. we budgeted about 11.5 million. So we had a little bit more expenses on the fleet side and some other areas. Not, you know, we were fairly close on expenditures, but the lack of the revenues created that funding gap last year. But like I said, I'm hopeful this year that we're rebounding. Our state aid allocation for this year is over $9 million. So we're probably about 16th most allocation in the state out of 87 counties. So we got a pretty small staff, and we're dealing with a lot of money. So years ago, someone did a great job of getting Pine County set up on the state system pretty well. And so we're benefiting from that, and got a lot of roads, but we do have a lot of money to work with. And so we will be using it this summer. So the pages 12 and 13 kind of break out where our maintenance funds are spent. We have 3 different systems. We have our CASA regular system, our CASA municipal system, and our local system. And every year, it's interesting, our municipal system is the most expensive. We have typically wider shoulders. We have storm sewer. We have maybe a little bit more salt, sand, and things are used, striping, pedestrian crossings, all those things. So our municipal system is a little bit more expensive. Our local system has more gravel roads, and just doesn't probably get as much funding as the others, is because we're depending on our levy dollars for that. So the total fixed assets we have on page 14, we got about $3.5 million of building value. That might be low. When I got my proposed taxes, I noticed that things went up. So maybe our buildings are worth $7 million. I assume I'll have to ask Kelly on that one. I don't think you got any calls on that. Did you, Kelly?
Not a one.
And then the final 2 pages really for the state, it kind of summarizes everything that we spend on projects. So the things that we spend, we get reimbursed if it's on a specific state aid project. At times, we don't claim everything because we're trying to put as much money to the construction projects, but there's times when we need the money to supplement the levy. And so there's kind of a balance there. We don't, if we can get the money and it's reasonable, we're gonna get it. If we feel like we need to put more of it into the construction side, and we can do that, we do that, you know, so. So that's kind of a quick summary. Is there any questions on any of the financial stuff?
Can you go back to the summary of maintenance costs?
Yep.
Where you got a cost, is that saying cost per mile?
Which page now?
What page am I on?
13?
I think so.
Yeah, that ends up,
13,
Yeah, you're on 12.
12,
12?
where it says routine maintenance, and then it's
Yep.
CASA regular,
Yep,
and is that,
that's gonna be everything. And now this is an accounting practice, so we put the actual money that's applied to those roads. So when the motor grader blades a road, he puts down as how many hours he was on that road, and so we have this cost accounting system. But then there's a lot of stuff that we do that isn't to a specific road, and so that's unallocated amount. So that's, you know, that gets divided out based on the percentage of miles. So that does boost the cost, but yeah, it's, you know, we're in the $5,000-6,000 a mile to maintain 700 miles of road. We get about what do we get? Let me do my math. Over $3 million, 3.2 million probably of maintenance money to use. Now, sometimes what happens is on our municipal side, since there's not many miles, we can't spend all that money in maintenance practice. And so that money gets flipped over to the construction side if we don't use it. So we don't lose the money. Now, on the regular system, we typically are spending way more than we're getting, you know, so there's a balance there too, you know. So, but yeah, it's when you factor in our staff and our buildings and our equipment, and you charge that all out, you know, it's a lot more than probably the townships. I mean, it'd be interesting to see the townships' actual road and bridge budgets and how many miles they have, and, you know, do the math. You know, that's kind of where that is at. Any questions on that? I also handed out this fancy little, I don't know what you call it, fancy sheet from the state. Oh, sure, there we go. If you look on the left side there, it's interesting. I guess we always kind of refer to fuel tax as, you know, well, when you look at it, license fees is catching up. Motor vehicle sales tax is a significant amount, and then Josh is helping out with 206 million in auto parts. That the tax on that is a large portion of it is going into this fund. So there's $2.6 billion that go into this fund every year. As you work your way, I guess I should note in the middle there on the top, you can see that the townships do, they do get their money from this as well. We do a 50-50 in our county. So each township gets a portion of our allotment based on 50% mileage and 50% population. That's also where we replace town bridges out of. So we manage those projects. They never get the money. We're responsible to do those projects. And we've been doing a lot of those. And so we're getting a benefit there. Then as you go to the far right, that's our county distribution. Like I said, out of 700 million, we get about just a little over 9 million this year, which is 1.1 million more than we got last year. So that should help. But like we said, we're dealing with inflation, and I don't know where the construction is going to come in. We'll be opening some bids here in the next month or so, get a better idea on where oil prices for the contractors are at. You got, you know, diesel fuel, which is a big thing on our projects, obviously. But we'll get into that when we open bids. The thing that we do with our bids is we have a fuel escalation clause. And so when the contractor bids, they're bidding at the price of fuel when those bids are opened. If that price goes down, we get a percentage back. If the price goes up, they get a percentage of that. There's a formula that the state has. And so if there's a big fluctuation in prices this summer, so if they went down for some amazing reason, we could get a rebate. And then if it goes up, then the contractor would get more money. So it kind of helps them bid it, because otherwise, if they don't have any idea where fuel is going to be, they're going to bid a lot of extra into it. So that'll be something interesting, but it's amazing how the economy has impacted our department. You wouldn't think of, well, the highway department is going to have a tough year because of the economy. And it's like that. It probably hit, all the other government entities, they got all this money, and it seems like, we got money for this and for that. But the good thing is that we have a consistent source of funding, that a lot of other entities don't have. They're at the whims of the legislatures from year to year, whereas we're, it's in the Constitution, we get that money. And so that's the good news. But any other questions on finances or anything else since I'm here, I guess, for. Right, we made it without coffins.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
Can I just building on Mark's last comment there about the funding sources. So there is occasionally discussion about impacting some of these sources of revenues for highway, like the gas tax holiday idea. And those would have the impact, anything that reduces the left side is going to reduce the right side. And so, if there's no place to backfill that, or the place to backfill that is by taking from some other important program, it's really an idea that might not be helpful.
Yeah, and a lot of engineers are concerned of some of these other sources that are proposed, because then we're lumped in with education and human services, and we're fighting for that money every 2 years with the legislature. So the auto parts deal, we don't get all of it. And so there's kind of a push to expand more of that into the system. And that's been an amazing amount of money. We didn't even think that would be much. I think a gas tax increase is, very unlikely. It was a struggle the last time that was increased. And possibly the lack of vehicles to purchase. That could impact at some point. But last year was a really good year. People were driving all over the place and buying vehicles. And so hopefully we'll get some projections this fall on where it's going to come in 2023. But they're typically not right. So whenever I get them, I just throw them away and just wait and see what we get. So. Well, thank you for listening, and
Thanks, Mark.
appreciate it.
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Mark.
We're looking forward to the highway tour in
Yeah. We'll get you some,
May 10th.
May 10th.
get you some bumpy roads to drive.
All right. Application for community project. Senator Klobuchar and Senator Smith.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, so you've already approved application to Congressman Stauber's office. The senators have now opened their offices to these applications. And so we're just looking to basically submit the same information to all three of our congressional delegation.
So we need a motion for that.
Yes, please.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Motion made by Lovegren, seconded by Moore. Any discussion? Not all in favor, say aye.
All right.
Thank you. Commissioner updates. Arrowhead counties. Anybody get there?
I didn't make it. I was in Rochester.
All right. Lakes and Pines. We had a meeting a couple of weeks ago. It was the first meeting that we've had. An unusual event happened around Christmas, first part of January. Lakes and Pines Board lost 2 members. Our colleague and fellow commissioner Gene Anderson from Mora and Mike Robinson from Rush City on the Chisago County Board. two guys who I got to know quite well over the years. If you knew Mike, he was kind of a jokester. And he was always kind of ribbing people. He liked to pick on me, but that was fine because he liked me. But we worked a lot together. Mike and Gene cared a lot about the people that, especially the people Lakes and Pine served. They really did. They really cared for what they did. And so the life will be different without them on that board. Otherwise, we're in the process of, Bob has submitted his letter of resignation, so we gotta find a new director. So that'll be a huge change for that organization. Technology committee was canceled. NLX, did they meet?
I didn't make that one.
Housing and Redevelopment Authority.
I did make that one.
All right.
And I was doing some catch up, but so if I missed something, Dave, feel free to jump in. They had their meeting and they're I think you've heard me speak. It's a really good board put together there right now. And they have a new audit. Redpath was the premise of the meeting is they were going through the 2019 audit and the old management. So the audit happened. There was some shortfall of some funds and they're sorting that out. The old manager that with the professional that was managing the building, she resigned and they moved on to appoint a new one. And there's the money that is, I think they've made a formal request, I think, to have that money paid back. And I think the total is like 11,222 or something like that, which is a big number. And there was some weird payments the auditor found in there. So more to follow on that.
So was that, did I hear you right? That was the 2019 audit?
Yes.
So we still got a 20 and 21.
Right, and I'm getting to that. So they're gonna, yeah. So they're going through that audit and then their Redpath it's a lot of work to go through the paperwork. And they were having a little problem getting the paperwork out of the old manager. So anyway, so the best thing that I think the best outcome is that we have people now that it's more professionally managed. And that was very obvious right now. It looks like it's more professionally managed. And the board is more, I don't want to say, they're just more intuitive to question things, I think is probably a fair thing to say. Go ahead, Dave. I know you want to say something.
Well, thank you. I think there were the audits were the 2019 and 2020 audits were very late. And they were challenging to complete because there was a lack of documentation, which was a finding that the audit made, that there was not the backup documentation that would be expected in a public agency. And so through that process, there was a mutual agreement that the current management company would relinquish its role and we would hire a new company, which we have now done, and they are working to take over effective May 1st. And so there were some payments that Matt noted that were requested to be reimbursed to the HRA. And then there were some findings that I think trace back to a board that was not schooled in what the requirements of public agencies are. And so I think that whenever you see that, that's always an opportunity to pause and make sure that all of the boards that you sit on, that you feel that you're getting the information and the education that you need in order to conform with the laws. Because it's hard and complicated.
Yeah.
And so the 2019 and 2020 audits are done. We have an engagement letter with Redpath to do the 2021 audit. And so that will be in progress soon.
So I thought didn't get enough. Did he get all the paperwork on 20?
I think he has given up on the paperwork in previous years.
Okay, that's
And
where I was
he
confused.
made the
I didn't know if he was gonna-
determination that the lack of documentation, the amounts of money are not material to the audit. Is that, I'm looking at Kelly, who's our chief auditor.
Yeah. But there was some funny movement of dollars in there, I thought, but I don't know what level it reaches.
Yeah,
Some of
and-
it's just confusing, I think. And maybe
Yes,
over there
yeah,
has-
so I think building on your earlier point, Matt, there will be more to come.
Yes.
And we will keep both the HRA, EDA board and the county board informed of any future developments.
Yep. And I think that, David, I think you reported earlier that on a previous meeting, they even had their investments out in the wrong kind of investments for public dollars, so that Kelly took all that in, and the county is now managing that, I think, too. So, anyway, that's all I really have on that.
Can I add one more point?
Yeah.
So we did have special guests, Dustin Goslin and
Yeah, I bailed.
Beth Gruber.
I had to leave when that was happening.
From Mille Lacs Corporate Ventures, who presented on kind of what Mille Lacs Corporate Ventures does, the development that they have done, the housing that they're working on, and the partnership that they have with the county. And so I think that was really an opportunity for the HRA EDA board members to get an exposure and an understanding of corporate ventures.
Thank you. Pine County and Educational Collaborative Leadership Network meeting. I was there. I thought it was a great conversation. And I think sometimes there might not be a real tangible thing that we accomplished this tonight. But I think the fact that we're all sitting there and we're all talking, and Pine County got a great kudo from the East Central board members, who one of them sits on a statewide task force for something. And I guess the discussion had been the difficulty that schools were having interfacing with their county counterparts in Health and Human Services. And this lady raised her hand, I guess, and said, well, that's not the case in Pine County. We have people that sit at our meetings and we're very in tune. The school resource offices are there, the counselors, and so that's good to hear. That's good to hear.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
I think what I have learned in meeting with the school districts is our leadership team, whether it's Health and Human Services or Sheriff's Office or probation or attorneys, they meet and their staffs meet with the school district staff on a regular basis. There's a lot of overlap that we don't see on a regular basis. And
Right.
so I think that's the value of making sure we periodically meet with the school boards, is to make sure that at the policy levels that we have some communication and understanding.
And that we're not standing in the way of good things happening, probably. Anyway, we have another meeting coming up. I don't remember when, but did we pick a day? July? Yeah.
July 27th.
Okay. Highway 23 Coalition Annual Meeting.
It was interesting. I kind of messed up and I went to the board meeting too. And so I was able to sit in and hear some of the things that they were talking about. There's a couple groundbreaking ceremonies that are coming up that we're invited to go to. But they're way down south and yeah. So the one thing that I still just think in awe that are all of the membership that they have, all of the private businesses and the cities that, I always thought it was going to be a small coalition, and it's huge. And so I thought that was really interesting. Amy Klobuchar did not make it, but she did have a representative there that talked about what they're doing, and it was interesting. You get any more out of it, Dave?
I agree that it is probably the most public-private partnership board that the county associates with. And the timing is probably pretty good with our membership, because they seem to have been working from west to east. And there sounds like there is interest in getting a subgroup on the east part of their area together, which would include us and some of the counties kind of from the 169 area east.
Black Canadian.
The other thing that they were talking about is they're hoping to get the city of Duluth involved, which would mean that they're going to be going from the East 23 that's going to be going up to Duluth. So that's their goal, is to get the city of Duluth to be a part of this also, to work with them. So.
Thank you. Snake River Watershed.
Snake River Watershed was interesting. They're working really hard to make it so that they can have one group instead of having the joint powers and the watershed. And so David talked to me about they're going to be hiring a new administrator and they wanted it to be a separate entity. And so we talked a lot about that, about if they have it be part of the Soil and Water or part of the Kanabec land office, that then they've already got their policies in act and everything is more set to go instead of having to recreate the wheel. And they keep leaning towards having it be a separate shop. But they want to have everything done tomorrow. And so I really appreciated your conversation, Dave, because I was able to say, you're going to spend a year or two doing your policies and you're not going to get it done tomorrow. You know, it's going to take a lot more. So hopefully there'll be more thought on that. I did step out on a limb and said that I didn't know if Pine County would support them having their own private entity. And so we'll see where that goes. They were talking about the plan that they're going to be doing and how they're going to enable it to have cleaner water and working with that. And one of that was to do some abandonment or some reconstructive of their ditches. And that stopped the meeting. It came to a complete halt. And we're reconvening on the 14th to reopen that because they don't really have jurisdiction over the ditches. We do. And why that would be there and then what we want to enable them to do. So I'll talk with Kelly a little bit later today about how that would hurt or benefit our county some more.
Yeah, I think, I don't know what our ditch inventory is, but it's very, very
That's
limited.
Mark.
We can always make more.
Very many ditches. We might not even have one in the water. So maybe we got one.
Well, then the thinking with that though is if they're going to do this for one watershed, are they going to try to do it for all the other watersheds? You know, so I mean, if you can stop something that's bad from happening at one, it might save us down the road for other ones. So we'll talk then.
I don't know if we have another one we didn't even know about that we share with.
Oh, really?
It's managed by Sandy. The guy called me and said. "Sandy's been our business this whole time, we didn't-"
Maybe that's the one that they're talking about then. Yeah,
It's very controversial.
yeah.
Huh.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
if I could just follow up with Terry on the board organizational question. Is there anything that we can do that would be helpful? And I feel like I know a little bit, but I don't know everything. And so I hate to weigh in prematurely, right, on something that isn't fully developed. But I know our experience is that boards that are not robust, right, meaning the people are kind of part-time, they come once a month, whatever, tend to get into trouble on the regulatory side. And we can back up 10 minutes and talk about the HRA. We can back up, a few years and talk about Riverwood or 5-county mental health. And so that would be my concern. And I think that would be shared by most of you, if not all of you, that if you go down the road of we're going to create a separate entity, we're going to hire staff, we're going to develop policies, you're going to spend all of your time doing that. And then you're going to have some bad outcome. You're going to have an employee that doesn't work out that you end up in court with. And then you've spent 2, 3, 4 years and you haven't improved the water quality of an ounce of water. Does that make sense? Because there's a lot of easier ways to go about that, either just contracting directly with a private sector company or hiring staff through one of the existing counties or SWCDs that already are established.
And I think, are they getting confused between being an entity in itself for a joint powers group versus and hiring and then turning around and contracting with SWCD and Connecticut County to be their working arm?
I'm kind of looking for you to turn your head and ask Terry that question.
I
'cause
don't
know.
even really know because everything was so indecisive, you know, it was,
Because we got they went down that lane in Lower St. Croix for a long time. The people that weren't used to having a joint powers said, well, let's just get it over with and be a joint powers. And they didn't want to do that. But then in the real workflow, what happens is then every time they want to do something a little different, they gotta, every entity has to go back and vote on it and bring it back, where if you're joint powers, you can vote. We send you to be the representative, you can vote on stuff and move forward.
Yeah, it's almost
But
like.
it doesn't mean you create this whole other form of government called the Snake River Watershed and have an administrator and employees and then what do the soil and water people do? You know, you let the soil and water people do the work, contract with them. So I don't know if that's where they're at or not.
well, this person would be the one that would go to the lake associations and go to the counties and do all the PR stuff and get people to step up. And that's what they just want them to do. But if, it's got to be set up correctly so that they can get the road running, which is the way that they want it to be.
With the current Snake River Watershed Management Board, though, they've hired staff in the past. And I think maybe that's what the hangup is that the one watershed, one plan policy committee and that brings it back to where the Snake River Watershed Management Board was going to change their bylaws to be able to turn into one watershed, one plan. And it would be essentially the same thing as they had. They just had to be able to accept a couple other things and they could just move on. But I know in the past they've hired staff and never had any issue. So I don't know.
Or were they Kanabec County staff?
No, they had like a PR person. Maybe they were, I guess I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah, and I mean, I know that if I were Kanabec, because they've housed that staff in the past, right? Well, if you create a separate entity now, you can't work on their computer network, you can't, you're not an employee for all the important reasons. So I don't want to belabor the point.
No, I don't either, but we hired, Lower St. Croix hired an agronomist. But they don't get a paycheck from the Lower St. Croix Watershed District.
And this would be a paycheck.
Yeah, they are getting paid from Chisago Soil and Water, I believe.
I think, like you said, I think that is what it was, where Kanabec hired them and then they contracted it.
Right.
And who's the one? Is this on the one watershed, one plan, or is it on the? It's got to be the one watershed, one plan.
Yeah.
So that'd be Deanna.
Yeah.
That's kind of heading that.
Yeah.
Maybe
But
that would be a
it's-
good conversation for you to have.
Who is that?
It's not even just them because it's the joint powers is the one, I mean, she wants to get, I can't think of her name.
Deanna
No,
or
the one that works for Kanabec County.
Teresa.
Yeah, and she wants to be done.
Mhm.
She's too busy to be doing it all.
Yep.
So I think, they're working together to get this accomplished.
Yep. There was a big push a few years ago to kind of get her out. Few people didn't think she deserved the 25 grand for Kanabec County every year.
Yeah.
So there was there's a little bit of, but that she works for Snake River Watershed Management Board. She don't work for one watershed, one plan.
Right.
And I don't even think she goes to the meetings, right? Or
No,
does
she just goes to the joint
Yep.
powers.
Yep. So I think Deanna Pomray, or it's kind of she works for Kanabec in the soil and water. I think that would be the one to have a conversation.
Okay, so thank you.
At least that'll get you somewhere.
You know, the other thing is they had two projects that they were gonna do that were approved. One was on the Pokegama Lake and one was on Cross Lake. We had talked about those a little bit. The last one was on Cross Lake and they just withdrew their project. So there's gonna be no projects that are on the board right now. But it came back to, we're gonna go in and we're gonna maintain your lake shore. We're gonna fix it up. We're gonna, you know, fix the erosion issues. But if you don't maintain it for 10 years, then you have to pay us back. And I think that's what kind of stopped it. You know, it's an older couple that have health issues and they just weren't willing to be put on the line for that. So.
All right, AMC Leadership Conference. Wasn't that a while ago?
No, it was just last week. Well, you're on legislative conference and that was a little while ago. But the leadership conference was just last week and it was really good. It was probably the best conference that I've been to. There was a lot of networking, but the speaker was how to deal with conflicting people. And he's from Minneapolis area somewhere and just very, very energetic, very good, good group of people. It was very good.
Where are we at? City of Sandstone meeting.
Want me to start this?
Yeah, go ahead.
Last week, myself, David, Steve, and the sheriff had a meeting with the administration of Sandstone and some of the city council. And it was basically a listening session, you know, but the background is it happens a lot. It happened when Mike and we were working. This comes up with cities when they have contracts. So the city is happy with the law enforcement that they're getting when they pay, you know, it's not a complaint. But they're saying we pay taxes and if we call 911, somebody comes. And then, but we buy extra coverage with our contract car so that person should be staying in the city. And then sometimes they go out to back other people up and this and that. You know? But just as many times I'll add that if there's something happening in Sandstone, 4 or 5 deputies come and handle that call too. We didn't really get into that kind of conversation, but it was a listening session. And so and I think it's some of the council members, I'm not sure. They're saying, why are we paying for this twice? That's really what it boils down to. Because no matter what time of day if we call someone, we should have an officer. So it was and I don't know, Jeff, is that kind of the general run of it? You know, there was a lot of discussion and how do you fix it? And they think crime's too high and they want more law enforcement, but it's a big cost. And then, you know, and you've heard me say it before, public has a expectation when they call 911, they want somebody there and they're paying tax. Go ahead.
So maybe this is the form of a meeting with some cities or people that contract with the sheriff, because I've had similar conversation with.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, so they're considering of just removing that contract, which would I think it's like 154,000. But there's a $10,000. That's where I'm rounding it up. It's like 153 something. And then the state gives them 10 grand. So it really boils down to 143.8 or something. That's the dollar amount, which is a big chunk for a small city. I mean, we get it, but law enforcement's expensive. You know, they know they can't have a PD, you know, just buying a car and gas.
Well, and we had that conversation. I had this conversation with another city and they're like, well, we think maybe we should get a PD. And I'm like, well, if you invested half of the dollars that you would put into a PD into the sheriff contract, you would have 5 contracted cars, probably 24 hours a day, you know, because of the cost. Like we've talked about, and I think we need to maybe make it clear again that I don't think it's a money-making affair what they contract with the county, because is it 50, 60 bucks an hour or something like that? Whatever it is, I'm guessing the county, it costs far more to have that vehicle, the deputy, all the services that surround it, the sheriff's department, the jail, the dispatch, all that is not whatever they're paying an hour. So it's not like my business where I provide something, we have a markup,
No,
it's not a money making thing, I think is what they need to understand that.
I think, you know, we all have friends that live in other places, and so they got a friend that lives in some other place that, well, they don't have a town cop and they don't pay an extra contract for the cop, and if somebody falls down in the street and they call 911, somebody shows up. And so you can do that. Every city in the county can do that. But then they're not gonna have the same amount of service. You know, I was driving through Pine City the other day at school let out time, and I think there was a deputy there making sure the school buses could get on the road in a timely fashion. Those kind of things go away when you don't have a city policeman.
yeah, and there was kind of a perfect storm in the last 2 years. You know, you have a deputy that gets tested positive, they gotta stay home for X amount of days, and somebody gets sick with COVID, they're home for whatever. And then you have, you know, family medical leaves and stuff, and it's like, you can't just hire people to, you know, if you have 3 or 4 deputies out, it just upsets the whole schedule. You know, people are overtiming and moving around, and you're gonna run short shifts. Or someone's gonna be helping more because the backup car isn't available, you know, things like that happen too. So I don't know if that, but I mean, it's in there, and it's always in there, but the COVID was, I think, a little worse in that time frame where they experienced things, so.
And the other thing is, Jeff has asked for more deputies and more deputies and more deputies. He'd love to have probably 10 more, but the money is the real deal. And that's one thing, kind of like what we're working with assessing. Maybe that is something we look into long-term, is just get rid of the contracts and.
Well, we're just putting, yeah, we'll see.
And
we'll
then just,
decide that
we
as a-
have it, you
Yeah,
know.
if we had an extra $1 million, we
Yeah.
could do it.
The
you know.
thing is we've had this conversation about one local.
Yep.
I mean, essentially the taxpayers are paying it now. They're paying the extra, whatever the contracts are, everybody that lives in the county. Is it viable for the county to charge the local cities, municipalities? Who's ultimately paying it? The people that live there, or, you know, and that's a conversation maybe to have with these cities. If they want to take that out of their budget, so they weren't.
Well, that's what they're saying. We need to spread the whole thing across the whole county and not just, but they want extra specific, so.
It's
that's-
never enough. I mean, I don't have enough coverage at my
Anyway,
house.
the decision hasn't been made, so we're just throwing it out there. So that'll be up to the city council. We can't make that decision for them.
The part that'll be interesting is if they pull it and they're not gonna have that extra service, they're not gonna like that either.
No.
You know, so you're not gonna be able to have the car that sit there or be in town. You know, it's, and that's gonna create a lot of conflict for them too. So it's gonna be interesting to see how it goes out.
And or the sheriff's department won't have the help that is being contracted there. So it'll just go on the burden of the rest of the county.
I think our duty, we don't have PDs. I think it's a duty of the county to provide that.
I think it's definitely worth a conversation with.
Yeah.
With the municipalities.
But it's about it's another 5% levy increase.
But where I'm coming from is if the local jurisdictions take that off of their levy, we add it, ultimately, the local person isn't affected. I mean, it adds to our budget, but
I get what you're saying.
if they just want to take it off, just to
But
add that to
I
their
live
bottom
out
line.
in the
then-
country, and so do
Yeah.
you, and we're not paying that extra $1 million for more deputies.
Mhm.
You know, nothing's fair.
No.
I mean, we know that, but
But I could see
what
if
is the most fair?
if a local city if Sandstone pulled, Jeff's still got to cover the area. I mean, it's our obligation. And if you do have a car there, certain amount of times he's taken some work off of that area, and that's just added on to the sheriff's department, added on to the rest of the county. So if they pulled off, well, I think if one city did it, another one, and it would ultimately fall on the backs of, I mean, you're not gonna not go into Sandstone because they don't contract, I guess you could, but it is part of the county, and And it might be worth a look, I think. I don't know.
Yeah,
Dave's thinking.
I'm willing to look at everything. I just don't know.
I'm not exactly sure what to say that would be most helpful, right? And I keep looking to the back of the room to Sheriff Nelson, because this is really his thing, right? Public safety is what he took an oath to uphold. And in Minnesota, most cities of substance have police departments because there is an increased need for law enforcement above and beyond that which you would find in the rural area. Might be because there's concentration of businesses. It might be because there's schools and other venues of congregation. It might be because there's just more people or a higher density of people. I am not aware of anywhere in Minnesota that interprets the law to say that the sheriff must be the primary responder to any emergency, air quote, right, in that jurisdiction. There are certain calls that probably qualify. There's a lot of calls that an average citizen would expect law enforcement to respond to, that under the law, the sheriff probably does not have the requirement to respond. And that's a terrible sort of perspective to take to frame the argument. But many of us, many of you have townships and cities in your jurisdictions that lately have been discussing fire contracts, right? And it's in some ways, it's the same sort of argument or framework of who should pay for what. And at this point, just as a reality, if the cities canceled their contracts, there would be an immediate loss of about $500,000 to the sheriff's office. I don't think there's anybody sitting in this room who thinks that the county has $500,000 to get back to that level of service and then start to address what the sheriff has proposed for several years, in that he needs additional staffing to adequately do his job. So, I mean, we left, my understanding of how the meeting in Sandstone ended is there was good conversation, there was good information sharing. Everybody walked away with a little something probably new to think about, but the onus was really left on the city council of Sandstone to think about what they wanted to do as their next step.
Yeah.
Is that fair, Sheriff?
Yeah, I'm trying to stay out of the discussion because I'm not sure I have much value to add. Other than, again, to me, I don't care where the funding comes from. If you guys want to pay for it through the county and we allocate it out to the cities. But keep in mind, we're already doing that. I mean, if you look at especially Pine City and Hinckley, they are high users of law enforcement. They contract for 10 hours a day. They're getting more than their share of coverage already, 24 hours a day. So again, in my model, we would have to account, if we're going to be fair about what the cities are actually paying for and receiving, there's got to be an increase in what that looks like just in reality, because our day coverage, typically we cover the contracts in the evening hours, when call loads get a little higher and some of our day people start dropping off the schedule. But we're equally as invested in responding to calls all day long. So those 14 hours that they're not paying for extra coverage, I think again they need to be made aware of what they're getting from the county for the usage. And those numbers I ran prior to that meeting, and Pine City, Hinckley, especially, they're equal use of law enforcement services with the way we set up our districts for patrol. They're using as much as the rest of that district during the non-contract hours that the cities are, or the townships are getting for that. So those are really blatant to me on how much they're getting that they're not funding. And Sandstone's a little harder because it's a bigger district that it sits in. And the population is spread out a little bit more, but again, it's the same thing. The higher use areas should, in my opinion, be helping cover more. And we can only be covering what we can cover with the pool of deputies that we have, and that's what it comes down to. So I don't know if that was helpful or not, but yes, it's an interesting argument. If you want to discuss what my funding would look like and what my request is, I'm not ashamed to come up here and ask for more every time I come and talk to you guys. I think you've noticed that. And who sets those numbers is really arbitrary. There is no perfect, you have this many people, you need this many deputies, you have this square miles, you need this many deputies, you have any of those kind of things are really kind of what the community feels it needs. And maybe that's the answer for Sandstone, is to listen to their constituents that live within the city limits and see what their final thoughts are. And hopefully they will open that up to a larger discussion before they make any of the decisions. And I'm not sure how that would go for them. Well, I have an idea of how that would go for them, but I'm not sure it would go in that direction. But I can't predict that either. So again, I can answer any questions. If data helps drive the decision, we can have maybe at the Public Safety Committee's level, we can have some of that data-driven discussion and see what that looks like. Or again, I'm open to whatever that might be.
We are a data-driven decision-making body, so I think that always helps. But it's an interesting discussion. Obviously, we're not going to solve anything today, but I think we all need to go mull it over and figure out in our mind where we're really coming from, and then maybe come back and have a COW meeting that we devote an hour or so to a thoughtful discussion about what would it look like if we did whatever.
All right, and as you're thinking about that, I want to put two pieces of information maybe into your mind. And the first one is we are probably an anomaly in regards to counties that don't have a substantial city that has a police department. So if you look around the state, most counties have some city of substance, whether, if you're Washington County, you've got Stillwater. If you're Little Falls with Morrison County, you've got Little Falls. If you're Itasca, you've got Grand Rapids. Most sheriffs, I'm guessing when you go to your conferences and talk to your colleagues, most of them have a substantial police department that they can actually rely on for some occasional help. So we're different in that regard. And then
Well, we get help from surrounding counties backed up all the time. Night shift, the Carlton guys.
But
go down and back our
it's
guys
not
up.
like having
No,
two
it does
cars in
happen.
Pine City,
Right.
No,
No, it's not as
So
fast.
if you look at like major cities, their police department is probably larger than their sheriff's department.
Yeah.
I mean,
That was-
so.
that was our experience in Bemidji.
Yeah.
Bemidji's probably got.
And then the other thing to remember is of all that money that we spend on the sheriff's office, a slice of it is patrol, right? There's a lot of other money that goes into dispatch, that goes into other pieces of, it's not all the deputy on patrol.
And I think that's what we're kind of like what this contract is basically maybe covers that. I don't even know. We've had
so-
kind of conversation. I doubt it even covers that.
Right.
But Reese's office, the
Yeah.
jail, every, Terry's
Like I
office.
said, we're not gonna solve it today, so we'll let everybody mull it for a while and we'll come back.
But I definitely think information to the contract, the people that are contracting it out, to have this conversation is probably, they'll probably sit back and say, yeah, we're getting a pretty good value for.
Yeah, they are.
So,
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.
thank you.
Thanks, Joe.
Any other things to report on?
I have a couple.
Okay,
I've been sitting in on some NACO TNT stuff, and there's a lot of talk about broadband, and there's some programs that are out there that I guess I wasn't aware of. And that's for people that, well, tribal people or people who are on medical assistance or have they're in the lower incomes. They're eligible, if you're a tribal person and you meet the requirements, you can get $75 a month to help you towards your broadband. If you're non-tribal, you can get $35 a month to help you towards your broadband, but it's a program that is out there. I was thinking about it with the new plans that we're gonna, and what's coming up in the near future here. The providers, if East Central Energy decided that they wanted to go with this and to get, have people allowed to get that federal help, they would need to sign up to be one of the providers that their customers can utilize this program. So there's a lot of different, there's been so many conversations coming up about how much is it going to cost to do broadband, and what is the cost going to be to get it set up and all that other stuff. And I guess I wasn't aware that there were some plans out there like that could help people. It will reduce from $50 to $30 per month from emergency broadband benefit plan, and over 10 million participants at this time. So I thought that was kind of interesting to do that. But yeah, it's interesting to see what's out there. And then also, I sat in on the legislative thing yesterday. And with transportation, there's the broadband, there's 2 standalone bills that are coming up for 10 million for general fund for the border to border. So it's interesting, it's exciting to see what's happening and what's becoming available to do that. One that with Mark, we were talking about the sales tax from the auto stores for the parts and stuff. They're looking at doing a dedication of 100% of that sales tax going to repair for repair parts to the transportation for roads and bridges. It would be 60% for roads and bridges and 40% for transit. So I thought that was exciting too. I don't.
Okay.
I don't. They just said that it would do the cost shift to 100%. One of the other things that there's a bill going out, which I thought was kind of interesting, was they're restricting developers from buying homes and turning them into rental properties to provide home ownership, which I just thought that was interesting, that was going to be a bill that's being looked at passing. So.
Did they talk anything about cut like Pine County is taking this year with program aid?
No, not that I caught. They did talk PILT. One of that's coming up, and so they do that.
I just find it very disheartening that in a year that they have $9 billion in surplus.
Right.
We're getting cut in some areas, and we're not getting our payments fulfilled that we should have had fulfilled 20 years ago.
I think I read last night in an update that they have it in and with support that is going to the full 50%. They put money in.
And on probation.
Yes.
But in that, correct me if I'm wrong, David, but in the formula
County program aid, yeah.
for county program aid,
Yeah.
Pine County is one of the counties that takes a 1.3% reduction in county program aid. So that's how many $1,000?
It's $22,000.
Yeah.
But to your point, where there's a $9 billion surplus and 7% inflation, to take a $22,000 reduction in our primary general aid program is a hard pill to swallow.
So I think it behooves us all. I mean, we can go to all the meetings in the world, but the people that push the green and red buttons are our state representatives and senators, and we need to send them a little memo and remind them that we're the guys that get beat up because the taxes for property go up. And one of the reasons they go up is because the state legislature refuses to recognize the fact that we're the agents of their jobs. And they don't pay us enough to do what they tell us we absolutely have to do. So I think that's part of our job, is to hound those guys a little bit, to say, either take the requirement away completely or pay us what we're worth.
They had a couple other things coming up that one of them is elections for drop boxes. They want to have live stream. So it's like, who will
Have what?
live stream so that you can see who's putting stuff in the drop boxes. And then also to watch,
Who's gonna look at the live stream?
exactly, and then it was who's gonna be,
Be
if somebody
recorded, I
requests
imagine.
it, because you have to redact information and stuff. So it's interesting to see the stuff they're coming up with. And they were talking about if the county would administer a business relief and rental assistance proposal, if they came up with another one, and I emailed Dave and said, we're not willing to do this, right? Because that's another thing I kept thinking, if they say, okay, we want you to do this, and then they say, we're not gonna give you the money for it, you know.
Is that to prevent tampering or dumping of?
The election stuff, yeah, it's Mary Kiffmeyer is the one that's doing it. She was really heavy into elections before. But they also want to live stream the election administration. So, you know, when you're opening your absentee ballots and that type of stuff. So it's who's gonna do the retention with them. And, you know, there's so many questions that are coming up with it, but I just thought, how would we do that?
And our direction is we would not plan to use any drop boxes for the election.
Right.
And I think there was a train of thought amongst some legislators is they didn't like the drop boxes. And so the way to discourage them was to put administrative rules in place that made it virtually impossible to have a drop box. And so maybe there was success on that end.
Well, so if you bring in ballots for your family, you can bring in 3 ballots, correct? You can so, and then you have to sign and say, I'm bringing in my wife's and I'm bringing in my son's or whatever. The drop box, you could drop 100 off in that drop box, and there's nothing to say whose it was or whatever. So I think that probably is the case, is they want to get rid of that.
But we weren't gonna do it anyway, so.
Well, and we did it because of COVID,
It was a 2020 COVID thing.
right?
There is no requirement to have a drop box,
Correct.
No.
And we're not gonna do it moving forward.
Okay.
but they're thinking of a requirement to have live stream the counting of the administering of the election.
Yeah.
Besides the drop, is that gonna be a requirement?
We'll see what they're gonna do with that. I just kept thinking, how would that work here? You know, it would be interesting. Cause it's all over the place. Mhm. Yeah.
Well, like if they're talking about in the polling places, that wouldn't even work, because most of our town halls don't have internet.
I think it's for the absentee. I think that's what they're coming up
We
with.
don't
is
have the
absentee.
broadband coverage for that.
Yeah. So it's interesting to listen to these meetings or sit in on these meetings and see what they're thinking and where they're going. And then, then you can reach out to your legislature and your senators and say, no, stop, don't think about this, So yeah, it was interesting to hear what they're up to.
Let's move on here we're up to 10A, I believe. Resolution. What is that, David?
Is this 22-21, the PILT resolution?
Yes.
So apologize for the lateness of this edition. This literally just came out yesterday with the request for county support. I know commissioners are familiar with PILT, and we've supported PILT through the Arrowhead Counties Association. And so it seemed reasonable to put this on the agenda for a formal review if you're interested in supporting the efforts. And for this particular proposal for Pine County would result in an increase of about $370,000.
I'll move it.
I'll second it.
Motion by Ludwig, second by Lovegren. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We'll get it in the mail this afternoon. So let's take a 2-minute break here and Leslie gets set up with the hometown fiber thing.
So how do we sign in? How do we sign into this thing now? Where was the code word?
Right here. Matt.
Can we get at it from this side?
No,
we have to go out to,
So if you.
Got an email
Safari.
this morning with it
I
on.
don't want to.
You got an email this morning.
Why does it keep pulling that
No,
up?
no, because you need to go to your email, not your Safari. Go to your email.
I'm gonna go through my email to access that back.
Because you received an email this morning with the link in it.
What Dave? This one,
Okay, there's the link.
just click on.
Oh, just, there we go. Oh, okay.
Now click on it.
Open, yep.
Good, how are you doing?
Do you have a good time in Florida?
I did, yeah. It was
Okay.
nice.
And then here's your username.
Got it.
Kind of, yeah, it's a little north
Why
of
don't you
there.
have a keyboard?
Jen's
Tell me
mom
how to
lives up
find
in
it.
Northport.
Teach me how to find my keyboard.
Ryan?
There
How do I
most
pull
of
up my keyboard?
Spent a little time in Fort
I always have this problem when I'm doing the chat.
There you
Oh,
go.
what'd you touch? Oh,
I just,
touch- I
yep,
should've
just
known
touched
that.
into
Same as
it.
the app.
Yep.
We went to SeaWorld. Did everything. We didn't go to Universal this time. It was a good time.
Rewind.
There you go. It was almost like 2 hours.
Yeah, we had a 2 days overnight.
You were there last week, right? Yeah, so were we. Yeah, it was ridiculous. Oh, boo-hoo. I know, it was almost like, this is too much. So. But we weren't complaining.
Touch your what?
Where's
Touch
my
down
ad sign?
here.
I'll just get back.
There it is.
Yesterday evening.
Underline.
Fun to go, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
This is a
Nope,
number?
nope, nope.
I want numbers.
So you want HTF
Oh, yeah,
first?
yeah.
I'll forward it out. so.
Again?
Yep,
Yeah. Did you have any?
now the underscore.
Oh, none.
You, Josh?
Well, it was delayed about an hour going down.
Yep. Yep, shift and then there you go.
Yep, I got it.
Take off, the plane in front of us took off. And he rolls ahead
Yep,
and
and then
turns
hit
back on.
sign in and you.
Taxiway, and I'm like, this ain't good, I wonder what's going on. Then about 15 minutes later, he comes on and says, the airspace in Jacksonville was too cluttered. Traffic control won't let us go. I'm like, you were on the runway, just pretend like you didn't hear him and go. We sat there for an hour to go home, but I think he made up a bunch of time on the way home, but we were about a half hour.
There you go. Yep.
Did you guys fly or?
Oh, we flew.
Why am I following
Yeah,
along?
people drove us
Down there.
We flew into Miami this time, so.
Much better.
Really recommended, not the nicest airport. but
It ain't very nice.
No.
Is it big?
Kelly complained out loud.
It's just, it's cumbersome and kind of old.
Orlando on that.
I know, my fingertips are turning blue.
Traffic by Orlando is
Can you remind me, I want to talk to you about Paul Raymond before we,
The nice thing.
I know, I don't understand what he's, so
It was too cold, you know?
if we.
Heather flew down to the Pensacola airport.
Oh, yeah.
It's like.
That's a lot to put difference in it now.
Airport, you know?
Fort Myers is, I'm in Fort Myers is nice to go into too.
That's it's not bad at all. Yeah, it's just, ticket prices always are high when I look. That's how it is.
Did you fly out of the cities, though? I mean, like a new slave, for example. Of course, never when you're on a typical.
It's back in the $100 when I got to go, but
How are you?
Fabulous.
Good.
Good law enforcement, so you keep 33%.
So I did try to get into this and I couldn't get into anything.
No,
It was like,
your login not work?
no, it was logged in and everything, but I click on something and it would say,
Whatever.
I just wouldn't open anything for me.
Weird.
So
Did you? That's weird. All right, well, hopefully it works today.
Whatever. I go, no, you just say yes. I'm like, yes. He goes, oh, you look like thanks. He goes, it's a 3-hour wait. It's 5 minutes.
Really?
We don't have nothing. There's like minivans there. And he goes, here's the keys to one. And I go, can I go help my father?
If there's an escape, there's only.
Kind of like-
By the time I got back,
Weirdly, I feel like it was like-
you're out of there. Oh. And it was like midnight.
I know this is Dave. There's other cities that do it.
I did, there's, I'll tell you what.
How you doing?
Take care, Tom.
We lost. You.
Jail administrator.
Cut off his broadband.
You always knew where to find them.
Is that?
Yeah. I know. Tom Barnick. That was Melissa's job. Yeah,
Well-
Melissa's job. Yeah, he was in the sheriff's department first. And then.
Oh, I don't know. I don't think he's related to that Barnick. I wondered, you mean like the guy who used to have the old guy who had that store north of Sandstone too was a Barnick? And then all the Barnicks. No, he's not. I don't think he's related to those guys.
Red Harley.
Oh, go ahead, Leslie.
All right. So did everybody get logged into the website?
I think so.
Link, the username, password. So you get to this landing page, which is our overall product that Hometown Fiber provided us. And as you scroll down, where it says explore the data, the first button on your left under the visual report is kind of like a PowerPoint presentation that ArcGIS, this sort of system, can do. And it walks just the average person through what Hometown Fiber did for us. It requires good broadband. But it talks about what led us here, what information that they gathered for us. It's a little interactive. It gives us a history lesson, and it's sort of educational foundation for people that might not understand what broadband is. So just kind of starts from the beginning, what many of us went through when we took the.
How are you moving through it?
Oh, scroll. Did you click on?
the right, scroll down.
Man.
These are the.
Oh, thanks.
All right, you caught up? I don't want to go too fast, but so I clicked on, that explore the data under the visual report. And that's where Ryan's walking us through. And it's kind of a neat little map that shows you very quickly and briefly everything that they mapped for us. It's a lot of data. And at the end, catching up to you here, it talks about some of their findings. How's everybody doing?
Scrolling
Good.
along.
Okay.
No.
Good.
I think I'm right where you're
I
at.
made it. You got,
Woo,
the right side keeps scrolling and then the picture
Mhm.
changes.
those silly iPads. And then at the end of their presentation here, they talk about the ponds, the passive optic networks, and what their suggestion was for us to kind of focus on. Talks about current technology, what exists, and it's within there where you can kind of interact with this presentation, where you can activate the data points or deactivate them, activate the fiber optic data points or deactivate them. Are you seeing that on yours, Ryan? It's under current technology, so keep scrolling. Yeah, or jump.
It's
Yes,
the
and
overview.
so you can either scroll through this or you can tab along the top where it says technology overview, current technology, findings overview, property rating charts, and interactive map. This is all part of their overall presentation.
Worse when you get to worse. It's all worse. Look at that.
So that's a
No
portion of
wonder
it.
it's-
And
It's worse than
then
it's bad.
if you keep scrolling or you get to the findings overview,
Our best.
Yeah,
that's the rating system that
I can't remember which one I hit.
Holland is
No
explaining.
wonder.
Trying to
I
find
mean,
which ones
mine's
there we
pretty
are.
good, but it's not.
And
the
what's
best.
really
know that.
neat about the
Much of it.
report that they generated for us is that you can zoom in to a property specific and find out what they've been categorized as. Or, once we get the files uploaded into Beacon, we'll be able to do a search in Beacon as well as this website and find this rating. Yes.
Is there a speed test on this, or does the Blandon one still work? Because that one seemed to, at least if you use the same one all the time, you got a point of reference.
I recommend people using the speed test that's on the Office of Broadband's website, and
Oh,
I
okay.
do have that linked on our county broadband website
Okay.
as well. Because that's who gives us the grants.
Okay.
So I'd rather have them have
Yep.
the data than anybody. As much as I love Blandon, they do
Yep.
give us grants, but
There's my
Office of Broadband has that.
Is that the one that goes through the federal then?
I'm yellow.
What's that?
Is the one that you use, the one that goes through the federal government so that, they're trying to fix our mapping because our mapping's horrible.
I don't know if
Should I
it
go
goes
back
through the
and see right
federal
now?
government. I know it's the state Office
That's
of
it.
Broadband.
The
though.
state
Okay.
office of broadband has
I've
been
got
trying
it.
to
Let me
fix
trust
those
more.
maps forever,
And the federal's pushing it too. So yeah, I mean, it's.
Say show.
but I think it's gotta happen at the state level before
Which one did you get?
it ever fix it.
It's here.
There it is.
All right, so they also, like I talked about the property rating charts, and they produced an interactive map for us as well.
Yeah. try that.
Now, I don't know how on an iPad you go back to the first landing page. So I just have different tabs. I don't,
Gotta use the back
On the
arrow
Pine County.
or scroll. You can scroll backwards too.
because if we go back to the main page,
Oh, we're going back.
and click under charts and graphs, explore,
Yeah.
Looking at this.
that's where we get some more data on
God.
property ratings, how many properties are rated worse, bad, good, better. And as you scroll down this page, it breaks it down by city and township in those ratings. So you can see what each one of our townships has for the bad, worse, best ratings.
This graph on the left of that chart, that's a telling thing. 6,200 people got good service. 4,000 got worse service.
And what's good
Almost
considered?
5,000 have bad service. and
Good,
85 people have
I
best.
believe good is like cable, Midco,
Which one did you hit to get the?
where it's gonna be okay for the next 10 years, but it's not fiber. That's
But
better.
you
at
know what's
best.
happened, Leslie, with our cable?
Hmm.
I think because more people have gotten on it now, it's not as good as when we started the Blandon project even. It's gotten,
Weaker.
my average, when I do test results, they're
Slower.
average way lower than they were a year ago.
And these numbers are properties. They're not individuals, they're not families, they're not houses, they're properties. So they may or may not actually subscribe to service.
Correct.
Okay,
But they could.
yeah.
And the worst is like, they might not even have something in the ground in front of them. And I think it is telling that there's only 85 best properties.
This is interesting.
And I'm guessing that those are all government buildings. A couple businesses.
Oh, yeah.
All right, I don't want to rush you guys along, so just let me know. The interactive map, if you go back to the landing page, the interactive map is something that I use weekly right now. When someone calls me and wants to know, I'm moving to Pine County and I want to know what internet providers are available. I'm using this interactive map now rather than the Office of Broadband's map because I know that this is more up to date than theirs. However, In 5 years, it probably won't be, but it's at least something that we can use. And this is where you have to be kind of GIS savvy, where you can search by property address, you can deactivate and activate layers, zoom in. We could really go nuts here if we wanted to, but I just wanted to let you guys know that this is the portion of the report that I use the most and I find most helpful.
So how do I get to, I got this map like
Yep.
that. How do I-
Ryan's up in the upper right-hand corner of the screen and there's like
Oh.
a magnifying glass and that's where you can type in your address.
You can't get an address that way.
Look it, we're the best. Weird.
Oh, here?
So where does it tell
It
you
didn't come
what
up
your,
with my
how good your
house.
service is?
No,
No, it says, let's expand your search.
Where does it tell you how good your service is?
the colors.
It's yellow, it's good.
It's my, the address
So
shows up
next
as
to the
yellow.
magnifying glass, you can just, yep, the legend drops down.
Yeah, might not work
Yeah, so
either.
click on
It's
that
interesting that the
magnifying
north
glass,
side of
you can type in your
Pokegama
address.
Lake
I
has
had my
really
address in there.
good.
So is that, mean,
East.
is it shows up in yellow? It means it's good or what?
Oh, no, and then you gotta search.
Mine's
So-
undeveloped.
This is
I
what?
got zero color.
And mine's bad at my house.
Well, you're better than me.
And I have Starlink, which was failing us the other night. We were getting like,
I haven't had an issue, other than it's going up and.
yeah, I was doing a speed test. It was like
Oh,
2
oh,
Yeah.
oh.
during
Hey,
the
Ryan,
Wild
how
game
can we
too.
save this to our
Imagine how angry
desktop?
somebody was.
Before I close out of it.
So Leslie,
Yes.
what's wrong? I put my address in here and it shows me up as red, which would be worse.
Mine comes up with nothing, which is nothing.
But I've got, I would consider
Yeah,
good.
you have Midco
Yeah.
cable. I don't know. That's a great question. They must not have viewed anything in your ditch or along your road that would have told them otherwise. Is the parcels to the west of you better than you?
Shows the whole section red. I bet you they missed that line that goes.
Hmm.
So what does it mean when there's no color?
Means they did not observe anything there.
Okay. And is that why when I enter my address, it doesn't come up with anything?
I'm not sure. We could look into it, but I would also, when you're in that interactive map, so you just are in the property ratings layer. There's another layer that's a little bit more helpful if you go over to, yeah, the field items. Most of those are turned off, like on mine as a default. So the middle box that shows like paper layers stacked on itself up in the right-hand corner is how you can turn on and off layers. And in there is where then you could see if there's fiber optic in your ditch by making the eyeball looking
Does it matter
emblem
what I
on
store it under,
slash.
Ryan, if it, making my favorite if it's Google or Apple?
And you can then like shut off the property rating layer. You can turn on all of the field item layers
Just give
and
me a
see,
choice, does that matter?
and then find your property and see what is in your ditch. I know there was a,
I just did a bookmark. Yeah.
after the announcement of the
Add the home screen.
grant for east of Hinckley. I had a few people reach out to me and they wanted to know where they fell in the scheme of things. And I had to play with the layers a little bit. I couldn't just base it off of the property ratings. I wanted to see what was in their ditch. Another one was a woman who lives west of Sandstone. And she's like, I'm fairly certain that CenturyLink is in the ditch opposite of the county road south of my house, but she's on a township road. And I did confirm that, yep, your Starlink is probably your best bet today until more work gets done. And that's kind of where we're going with some of this information, is just confirming that these people do know what's going on and it's true. This is the best that you can get. And here's some resources.
So when does Star Wire? We'll find out tomorrow, some information.
Yes,
from
we
them?
have a meeting with them
Okay.
tomorrow. Yeah. And
I
then
thought they were already working on that tower out there. Well,
Oh,
turns
it's
out
not.
it's T-Mobile.
was it T-Mobile?
Is this the project for Royalton?
So I can't find it now.
Well, it will hit Royalton, but
Right, on the tower on
it's
your-
out by the radio station.
All right. If you want to go back to the landing page, there's two more things I just want to show you, but they're not as fun or interactive as this. The last two items on the bottom, if you click explore, you'll be brought to a page that brings you then to links to documents on Google. So that's where there's a lot of documents that we will download and save on our server in our broadband report file. These are the paper things that people generally like. But if you were to click on the county images, it gives you actual JPEGs of the maps that they did for us. So you don't have to be online to see it. They also mapped out every township and city for us. So every individual township has an item that they can look at. And what else is in there? Getting lost. And under documents, back on the landing page, that's where we can download a full PDF report. The exhibits with the city and township ratings. Pretty much everything that we have for broadband related to this project. It's a lot of information. I love that it's all stored here right now. And that's kind of conversation Kelly and I had. I was like, oh, I just love ArcGIS, but it's so expensive. So we have this website for 6 months, I think, with 8 hometown fiber. But eventually all the interactive map stuff you see, we're getting put in Beacon. It won't be as fancy, but it'll work for how we need it to. And all of the exhibits and all of the documents and the JPEGs will be saved here and retained at the county.
So now they're finished?
They are.
Okay, so where do we go from here then?
Well, where we go from here is we now have better information to understand where we're at. And, you know, they have given us some suggestions
Oh, that's all it is?
on where to
Oh,
go
I'm sorry,
next.
didn't
And that
I?
was in their, I
Yeah.
gotta find it.
Okay.
It was their visual report.
And this will help us work with the providers also.
Click on it.
Correct.
It will give us a better informed platform from which to work with providers.
Mhm.
Providers had their own information and we just had to trust them and what they were telling us. This tells us exactly what is there, who owns it. If you recall from Hometown Fiber's preliminary presentation, they were suggesting, you know, certain projects that we undertake to kind of start making the good and worse good and bad connections better with the pond project. And I know that we got a little bit of feedback from Landon Foundation consultant on that. So I'm kind of trying to sift through what everyone's saying and what is going to work best for us. It's become kind of.
When I look at a map on that images and they got the little yellow squares, what's the little yellow square? Is that a household?
Can't see what.
I'm not getting it.
I would have to look at the legend. Second here. No, it's not the outline. It's like the line with a box in it. And I think I want to say it's like fiber or
So we're,
So in the legend I'm looking at.
Yeah.
Which is the field items. It says the yellow dot is cable, TV, phone, internet.
but he's got like the boxes with the yellow. It's different than the little yellow dots.
those. No, I got little yellow dots. I got squares. Is that a pedestal?
Are you on like a,
Are you able to get to your layers?
I don't know.
He's on a PDF, so that's just,
Oh,
you want to go to the interactive map.
does the PDF you're in have a legend?
No,
Okay. I think that means pawn ready.
okay.
And that was their big finding or suggestion. I went back to,
I'm sorry, I was looking, Leslie, when you were talking.
that's okay. I know, I knew it was gonna be very distracting.
You said something about we have access to this for how long? 6
I
months?
think about 6 months. Yep.
And then it'll go away, or we gotta pay a fee to keep it, or what?
I think there would be a fee to maintain this on our GIS with Hometown Fiber and maintain this sort of login. There is a fee to it right now. What we're looking at is what was included in what we paid them to do for us. You know, once it gets.
I don't
into-
know going forward how long it'll be valuable, but
Right.
it's interesting now.
I encourage you guys to play around with it. If you have questions, email me, call me. I enjoy using it. I think it's very interactive and helpful. To kind of go back to Terry's original, now what? It's a good question. Right now, you know, we have providers wanting to talk to us. I mean, we're in a very different climate than we were 9 months ago. We have a meeting with a provider tomorrow. I'm having a phone call with another one on Friday. We got these awards. People are very curious, interested. What's our plans? I find this website helpful to know actually what is out there. And I am curious to potentially move forward with repairing some of the things that they have noted need repairs and upgrading what's out there and seeing what providers want to help us with that, because I don't know for a fact if this would fix your speeds, but what if it is just a outdated blah, blah, blah
Yeah.
that needs to be upgraded for a few $100 or a few $1,000s, and it would increase your speed and increase the capacity in your neighborhood. I don't know. But that's what Hometown Fiber was alluding to.
Gonna
And,
finish up
both of
those
them.
fiber to the home
And,
projects.
Right.
Then maybe they'll put some more equipment in Pine City and,
Yes.
you know, I don't know.
Yeah.
Thanks, Leslie.
Yeah. Let me know if you have questions. I think this is a really cool end product. Like I said, things can be downloaded. An actual paper report could be assembled. It just feels like we would kill a tree when it's all at our fingertips. and interactive this way, but I would like to share some of the exhibits with the townships and the cities because this is their tool too. So moving forward, I think that would be probably a most likely next step. But I wanted you guys to see it first. I've been playing around with it for a good month now, so
Would you,
sharing it.
would you think we would invite the townships to come here and look at it?
We could, I mean, we could do something similar as we just did here. We could email out the login. I think that would, some of them could probably figure it out.
The problem,
Others might need help.
most of them won't have enough access to make things work.
Correct.
Well, some of them don't have the Wi-Fi to look at it when they're at home.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I mean,
Yep.
Yeah. So. There you go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. I think we're at the end. Check your meetings upcoming.
And so we are back here next Tuesday for a committee of the whole meeting starting at 9.
Yep. No,
Yeah.
I'm gonna have cake. No other business. We'll declare the meeting adjourned.